Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I've got the latest in the CZ Scorpion series. It's the Scorpion 3 Plus, and this is a few improvements over the original Scorpion. Please don't forget to check out our website. Go to our affiliates page. You'll find discount codes for things like Mantis X and Core belts. Link to that cool little bore light that we use for lighting up the barrels. Use those links. It will often save you money, never will cost you any additional money, and helps the channel. And please consider supporting the channel on Player, formerly Utreon, where we can do some types of videos that are no longer allowed on YouTube. So they have changed a few things. The fundamental gun itself, it hasn't really changed, but they've changed a few things to make it a little more ergonomic and a little more modern. First off, it has an ambidextrous mag release, so you can now pop the magazine out from either side. But this is actually a magazine release, not a bolt release, which is different than the Evo 3 that preceded this, as well as ARs. And the bolt release is now down here. So if I were to put the magazine back in, lock the bolt back, and I hit this, it's going to eject the magazine, not drop the bolt. If I hit this lever down here that I hit with my finger, and there's one on each side, that drops the bolt. So if you've got an Evo 3 and you get an Evo 3 Plus, or you're used to the Evo 3 and go to the Plus, everything's going to kind of feel backwards. You're going to do one thing and expect a result and get a different result. So it's just a little bit of a learning curve. Also, if you're coming off an AR, you're going to find that you're used to this being a bolt release. Not a big deal. It's not a deal breaker. It doesn't ruin the gun, but it is different, and it's different enough to affect the way you use it. The other thing you'll see is that it's M-LOK under here instead of Picatinny, and the Picatinny rails that were on the side are gone. That actually, in my mind, at least the bottom part, is an improvement. Picatinny rails are a little bitey when you grab a hold of them, so having something smooth on the bottom is definitely an improvement. So the only thing is that with this faux suppressor that's in here, this thing looks like a suppressor, but it's not. This is actually just a barrel cover. Underneath there's a threaded barrel, but it kind of blocks the use of these as M-LOK. So putting accessories here on the side is going to be a little different. So basically this is just a shroud, and that would thread off, and there's 1/2 by 28 threads under there. The cocking handle is reversible. You can see it can go on either side. So they've kind of gone all in on the ambi on this, which is nice. Unfortunately, for those that are lefties, the ejection's on the right side, and that's where it stays. There is no option to switch the ejection. That's the only difference. There's some reinforcement here. I'm not aware of magwells cracking or anything, so I don't know that reinforcement was necessary, but it's there, and it kind of looks kind of cool. They did change the grip angle a little bit and a few other characteristics of the grip. It's a little more straight up, and it's got kind of a shelf here. So one of the things I'd heard is that the ambi safety was less bitey on your hand because they improved the safety lever. They didn't. The safety levers are identical. But what they have done, I'll turn this where you can see it, is when you grip this grip, there's kind of a bit of a stop here. And what it does is it has a tendency to kind of drive you to grab it a little bit lower, which it hopefully puts the safety lever out of the way of your hand. What I found is I've got kind of average size fingers, so when I get into the trigger, I'm not arching my finger a whole lot, and it's right in the way. So this on recoil does smack me. If you've got longer fingers and you're doing this, it kind of puts it out of the way. Now I happen to have an Evo 3 here, and I can show you the difference. On the Evo 3, the grip angle is more angled, but it also comes higher up. So when you grip it, you're kind of gripping it right on top of the safety. Both of these guns are getting the safety delete. This has got to go on both of them, but more so on the 3, because it really doesn't matter whether you've got longer fingers or anything. You're going to find yourself trying to grip it down here, and then it's going to be flippy because you don't have a lot of support. So I like the grip improvement, and in theory it does help a little bit with the safety, but not really. It doesn't really solve that problem. Other than that, the gun is well constructed. We'll talk about the stats in case you're not familiar with the prior version. It's 15.2 inches front to back for this one with the longer barrel. It's got a 7.8 inch cold hammer forged barrel. It's 8.9 inches tall, of course not counting the optic that I stuck on it, and it's 2.4 inches wide. It's a bigger gun. I mean, it's a pistol caliber carbine, so it's not intended to be tiny. It weighs 5.3 pounds, so it's not super light, but it's well balanced. By the time you get your hand up here, anywhere up in here to support it, whether you're grabbing it back by the mag well or up front, and of course there is a stop to prevent your hand from accidentally getting out there in the business area of it. But it's comfortable to easily hold, just like anything else that you would hold out in front of you with two hands. I didn't find any trouble with this versus like an AK pistol or an AR pistol. And the nice thing about it is it doesn't have that buffer tube sticking out the back, so you don't have this thing in your way out the back. And this plate on the back has a QD mount in it, and it's also removable in the event you wanted to put something else back here instead of this plate. It's an option available to you. Now, generally when I review guns, I review them as they come out of the box. I don't put optics on them for the first review. But I'd done that previously with the 3 and realized even though these are well-constructed sights, I can't shoot them. So I knew that I was going to end up just showing you and I'll explain why in a second. But I would be doing a review of how bad this thing is to shoot before I put something better on it for my eyes. And it didn't make sense because I'd already done that with the 3. So the sights that come on this are actually well constructed. They're aluminum. They're good quality sights. Here's the front sight. It's adjustable, but you'll see it's just a black post. And the rear sight is also adjustable, and it's got multiple aperture sizes. So bigger, and you just flip this, and it's height and windage adjustable. So what I will say is from a quality perspective, these are excellent sights. From the ability to see them well, they're not that good. It's just they're difficult to shoot well. So in this case, I put this Vortex Spark solar optic on it, which if you look at the footage, you'll see with this optic, I can actually see what I'm trying to hit, and it's easy to pull nice tight groups with this. It's mechanically capable of tight groups. If your eyes work well with these, then these are actually good sights. So I'll probably put an optic on the other one as well, simply so that I can enjoy shooting it well. It's easy to use. One thing too, you can lock the bolt back by pushing it up into that cutout. So if it does lock back automatically on the last round. If you put an empty mag in it, you saw me do that earlier, it'll lock back. But if you want to intentionally lock it back, you can do that. But there's not really a catch or a divot for it to come into. So it's just being held by pressure. So it's easy. You can see it doesn't take much to bump it and it closes. So it's important to make sure that if your hands are in the business area over here and you've got it locked back, what I will do is I'll grab the gun like this and hold it. So you can see I'm kind of just pinching it to make sure that if I'm messing around in here or doing anything, and you'll see that during the cleaning or the disassembly process when I show you the internals, it's real easy to knock this loose, and it's a blowback gun, so it's got a fairly strong spring and it's got a heavy bolt. It will bite you. So it's just something to be aware of. Before I get into that though, let's talk about the trigger. So the trigger is a decent trigger, but it's not spectacular by any stretch of the imagination. It's a battle trigger. So here's the take up and then the break. And it looks on camera like actually a pretty nice trigger. The trigger, by the way, itself is plastic. But what I found at the range, when I had this thing held out in front of me and I'm trying to keep 5.3 pounds of something out in front of me stable, hold that red dot on the bullseye and pull the trigger, I found that the trigger felt kind of vague. So it's interesting that here at the desk, minimal take up and a seemingly decent break translated into rather difficult to shoot well, at least from the trigger perspective at the range. So it's not a bad trigger, but it's not a spectacular trigger. And if you're going to try to do any kind of precision shooting with this, which that's not what these are made for, but you would have to do something with that. Overall, the trigger worked. I just found it a little bit difficult to do all of those things at once and pull the tight groups, but you could see I did it, so it's possible. So MSRP on these from CZ is $8.99, and interestingly enough, on their website it shows it as a limited production run for the summer. But I've been seeing these things for a while, and I'm seeing them kind of everywhere. So I don't know if limited has a couple commas in it, but that's what at least it says on their website. This is kind of designed to be, a military weapon from a design perspective. That's kind of their target. So it has some of the characteristics that you would expect. One of those is easy disassembly. So to disassemble it, and I'll show you the internals, all you have to do is lock the bolt back. There's a pin here. Pop that pin out. And the only reason I'm using this is, number one, this gun's fairly new, so it's tight, but also it's kind of a tight cutout in here, so it's a bit of a fingernail wrecker if you're not careful. So the edge of a brush or something like that is handy. This comes out. It's well constructed. There's not a lot going on. I'm going to put it on safe just so that I don't accidentally drop the hammer while I'm messing with it. But there's not a lot going on here, and the housing is polymer. There's a lot of polymer in here. Of course, the parts that handle the pressure of the round are all steel. You can see the feed ramp's kind of offset. It's kind of an interesting setup, and which is right over here on the edge. But then there's also a feed ramp here. So this is probably designed if the round gets a little bit out of position to make sure that it'll feed correctly and also extract correctly. So to remove the bolt is fairly easy. Big thing is make sure that you're preventing, in fact, it did move. So this had moved while I was just handling it. So make sure that you've got your hand held there. And as soon as you touch this bolt, make sure you have positive pressure on it. But you just lift it up, push it back a little bit, lift it, and kind of rock it out of place. It's a big, heavy bolt. It's a blowback gun, so the bolt is big and heavy. And you'll notice the bolt is dry. I cleaned it and I didn't oil it because I knew I was going to take it apart, and that way I wouldn't get a mess all over my hands. But I will properly oil this before I put it back together. Fairly simple. Doesn't have any of the complexities and moving parts of an AR. And then you've got steel inserts in here for the bolt to ride on. This is polymer, but there's steel down here. This area is steel, so the actual guides are steel. So the wear components are steel, the housing components that just hold things together are polymer. And that works. You'll see that in many other similarly designed guns. And actually, before I put the bolt back in, I could show you the barrel with the bolt in, but then I'm also more likely to get bitten by it by moving it incorrectly. Let me get the light in there. It is a well-machined barrel. Nice, sharp, clean rifling. You see it there at the back. And one of the things you'll find with CZ, the quality of their machining and processes and design is high. Some of their ergonomics can be a little strange at times, but the quality of what they do and the machining and all the other things that are associated with any of the guns they make, CZ75, any of them, the machining quality is high. Okay, so again, I'm pinching this so that it can't pop loose. To put the bolt back in, you put the foot back in here, kind of push it back, rock it down into place, and then when I pushed it back, it locked into place. And I'm I'm keeping a little tension on it, and then as I release tension, I make sure it doesn't move. Don't just kind of loose and leave your finger in there, because again, you're possibly going to get bit. Don't drop the bolt till you put the trigger housing back in. And this just kind of rocks in place, lines up, and there's a pin sticking out over here. You push through, kind of locks in place. And if I did it correctly, I'm back in business. So I've correctly reassembled it. Easy to take care of, easy to clean, easy to maintain. Few things to be just aware of, because most of the guns, when you're cleaning them, you're not touching or putting your fingers in there with things under tension. In this one you are, so you have to be a little bit aware of that. Overall, for what it's intended to be, which is a pistol caliber carbine, it's not intended to be small, it's not intended to be a pocket gun. It's really a good home defense weapon. Obviously it's not a good carry weapon for concealed carry. Good for home defense, fun at the range. If your eyes can see those sights, the sights are actually decent. Mine can't, so red dotted is, or upgraded sights. This would also make a good truck gun, car gun, boat gun if you're out hunting and you need something where you don't necessarily have to be able to conceal it. And with all the polymer, it's going to hold up well. It's not going to get as easily scratched up and dinged up, and it's less likely to have housing, things on the body of it corroding from getting scratched. They are pretty nice guns when you look at them for what they're kind of designed and intended to be used for. One important note I'll make, and I mentioned that it comes with 2 of these 20-round magazines. This is the magazine that fits the 3 Plus. It has a black follower, and it has a notch here. This magazine will work in the Evo 3, but the Evo 3 magazine, which has a white follower, the color of the follower doesn't mean anything, but the lack of the notch does. So you can use the color of the follower to quickly identify magazine versions, but it's this notch that matters. It's not present on the original ones. The Evo 3 magazines will not work in the 3 Plus. The 3 Plus magazines will work in the Evo 3. So if you're upgrading, you're buying new magazines. If you buy Evo 3 Plus magazines, then they'll work in either. So I would say if you're going out to buy a new Evo magazine today, regardless of which gun you've got, get the 3 Plus mag, because then in the future, if you do get a 3 Plus, it'll work. But other than that, when you look at the magazines, they're basically identical, other than some stampings and stuff like that. But the rest of them are the same. And this is what the Evo 3 uses for the locking mechanism, and you'll see that that's why the 3 Plus mag will work in it. Beyond that, if you're looking for a fun gun, this is it. Good home defense and truck, as I mentioned. But if you're looking for concealed carry, this isn't where you're looking. Beyond that, if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell to be notified if you do. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Player, Rumble. We're pretty much everywhere. And thank you.